All right, everybody. Well, I appreciate it. And Dave, thanks for inviting me back to NCET. Everybody, thank you very much for carving out a little bit of time to listen to this today. Gary talked a little bit last week about some of the work from home, and everybody has been putting out a lot of guidance and literature about working from home. And some of the things you can do is you migrate your office from your workplace to your home office and kind of building that out. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the risks that are involved with that and some of the things that we've seen. And I've responded to quite a bit of quite a few data breaches and incidents that have related to compromise of networks in businesses as a result of the criminals leveraging people's networks at home and the lack of security and pretty much out of the box security, as we call it in my world. So first up though, I want to ask you kind of, what'd you do? How'd you spend your Independence Day weekend? Most of y'all were probably, enjoying fireworks, enjoying a little social distance barbecue and things like that, because I saw the fireworks were going all around. We had it out here where I live as well. For me in my world, I sit by the phone waiting for the call for data breaches or ransomware, because that's when it usually happens along these long Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, 4th of July, the last 3 4th of July weekends that I've been doing this, that spent the entire weekend. So not even kidding, since Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm dealing with my 6th data breach. As a result, well, some of them aren't really classified as data breaches; they're incidents and they're loss of data, but it's data that's been compromised externally from a lot of these networks, but it's perceived to be involved with their internal networks. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the end, because that's something that is relevant to everybody in the state of Nevada right now, and some things that are going on. But so, your office at work might look something like this. This is what I went to Dave's office and took a picture of it, and this is kind of what his office, looks like back there. But, everybody has their office. They've been working for quite a while, and you start collecting up lots of things in there. You say, well, we've got this COVID thing going on, and we're going to start working from home, and we're going to shut offices down. A lot of people have this grandiose perspective of, or perception of, hey, I'm going to set up my sweet home office out there, and it's going to look like this. And, we're going to really trick it out, and we're going to put some monitors up there. I'm going to have this little operations center. I'm going to sit back on conference calls like we're doing now with my cup of Java, and take notes, watch TV while I'm working. And the reality is, this is what some of the offices kind of end up looking like out there. They're really poorly maintained, and they look a lot like a lot of these networks do out there. And I use this kind of as a tongue-in-cheek example, because the expectation is people have a lot of great ideas for what they want to do with the home network. There's a lot of smart things that they want to do, and they really deploy it poorly at home, because they pull things out of the box. They order something from Amazon, they connect it up, and as soon as they get it connected up to their network and it communicates, and they tell whatever that communication device is, they give it a couple of commands, and if it's voice commands and it executes, the lights go on or off, they're done. And in the real cases, they're just setting themselves up for that ransomware, which we say is the coronavirus of networks. Because I don't care how secure you make your networks, at some point you're going to be compromised, or you're going to find yourself in a compromised situation where either you're hacked, somebody who you do business with is compromised, or somebody in your business is compromised, and that's going to directly impact you. So there's a lot of things you can do at home that are going to help out your companies. And then I'm going to provide some ideas that those who may be business owners as well and have relationships with them, they can pass that back to their employees the other way. A good book, and I've got a whole list of reference links at the end of the slide deck, and I'll provide it to you, Dave, when I'm done here, that you can distribute to everybody. But the NCAS is a great resource for folks who are setting up home networks and things like that, and it gives you a lot of good resource ideas, and it distributes a bunch of other links elsewhere. But it talks about setting up your home devices and treating them kind of like a business device, especially in this unique time that we're doing business. and you're bringing in a lot of that risk on yourselves just because of the exposure. Then you have boredom that sets in, and you start doing things on your network that you might not necessarily do in other cases, because you start watching some of the social media or some of the news, and then that really spawns a whole lot of emotion from folks as well. So I want to throw that slide in there because it's a good reference slide. And it's a good graphic to take and print off and carve out separately, and to be able to have that at your ready. But I'm not going to walk down a whole bunch of steps for you. I really want to isolate and focus on a few of the key points and some of the things that you really need to focus on in protecting your assets. And these are the 5 things that you really need to be doing. And I highlighted the top 2 because multi-factor authentication and 2-factor authentication and backing up and having resilient backups of your data are the 2 things that are really going to save your tail if and when you do get compromised, or if you just lose data because a hard drive fails or something like that on your laptop or your PC, and you need to recover some data. And it may not be any fault of anybody's other than a failure of your equipment. But the 3-2-1 backup strategy, that's my very next slide. I'll focus on that in just a moment. It's a sharp way of being, and it's economical way that businesses do it, and you can do it at home as well at a pretty good cost savings. But if you're not familiar with 2-factor authentication, I've got some resource links on there that you can learn about it a little bit deeper, and we'll talk about it as well as some of those other key points that relate to password management and how to do that seamlessly across your networks. And locking down your appliances is something, I'm not talking about your refrigerators and stoves and things like that, but hey, if you have a Samsung internet connected refrigerator, you probably have to lock that down too. But I'm talking about your network appliances, your routers, your switches, and any of those devices that you're connecting up. We find a lot of times, I do a lot of penetration testing where we're going out and evaluating the security in those networks for businesses. And what happens is we find switches, routers, printers. Heaven forbid somebody locks down their printer, because that's the low-hanging fruit for networks. We find wireless deployment of these devices all the time with factory default credentials, and most of them are admin. And I'll show you a resource where you can find the default password for pretty much any device. They're all over, or you can just Google it these days. And I'll talk a little bit about your email and making sure that you're patching your systems, and I'll show you a real quick security setting that you can do on your Windows 10 machines at home if you're using Windows 10, and you shouldn't be using 7 or anything older anymore. So if you're using a Windows machine, a lot of us are using Macs or Linux and things like that, but the gross majority of businesses are using Windows. So to the 3-2-1 backup strategy, you need to have 3 copies of your data. You have 2 working copies, or a working copy, and then you have another second backup of that, and then you make a backup of that backup, and you're detaching it might be a removable hard drive or a NAS or something like that. You want to detach that from your network, because if somebody gets into your network, and the attackers who are hitting you with ransomware are real savvy these days, and they know their tools know exactly where all your key data is and all your backups are, and it hunts for that, and it encrypts those as well. Even if you're backing it up onto Dropbox or OneDrive or somewhere else in the cloud, in a Google Drive or something like that, if they're connected and they're active, then they'll hunt for those and take those down. So you want to make sure that you're backing that up. And then you have that other copy stored off-site, where it's physically off-site, either in another building or someone else's house or something like that. And then you bring it back every month or so, or periodically, even more often if you're able to update those backups. But you want to have your working copy, another copy that you detach, and then you want to push one of those ideally into an external space, or even up into cloud services or something like that that's not connected to your network physically. So password management. Everybody hates passwords. We all really stink at passwords. Strong password is probably one of us sitting here today probably has, summer 2020 as our password. And if you want to make it really complex, you put an exclamation point at the end of it, right? And then I know what your password's going to be come fall. And then I know what it's going to be in the winter again as well. One of the first things that we do when we are doing an incident response, or we're doing a network security assessment, is we go out and crawl all the dump sites, and I keep them stored here on my system, and I just collect all these up, and all these dumps that you read about with Equifax and whomever, with the MGM hotel, when all those accounts are dumped, we go out and grab them, and I'll show you some pictures of the dark markets here of where those resources are. And people will sign up with their business account, and they might sign up for their Fitbit watch or something like that using their business account, and they'll use the same password for their Dropbox or Spotify. And it's a very poor idea, because I see your password is dumped in clear text, and then I'm going to go right back to your business. And if I get a prompt for your remote Windows or something, or a remote email or something like that, there's a good chance that I'm going to be able to log in if I'm a bad guy. And that's exactly the MO that they use. So you don't want to use your passwords in more than one place. And anything that you're doing at work, you want to keep that completely separate and disparate. But it's really challenging when you're sitting at home on your business machine and you don't want to jump back and forth. So you start working that convenience model. You start connecting personal hard drives and connecting to those personal accounts while you're sitting at your workspace during that period of the day. And so I get that, but it's one of those discipline measures that you need to really focus on. But make sure that you're using, something like a password manager, and I'll talk to you about a few of those in just a moment. Is anybody familiar with what that little logo is up on there? If you know, and you raise your hand if you know what that is. Man, all right, I'll have to give this book to the next folks out there. So that's Authy app. That's one of those authentication apps that you could use when you're doing two-factor authentication. The importance of two-factor authentication is you register those accounts, and you pick pretty much any of those major accounts that you're using: Windows, Microsoft, Google, your Gmail, your Yahoo, and a lot of them, they all have it. And so when you sign in from a machine for the first time, and it recognizes it's a new machine, it shoots you a message to either that app or one of these other apps that are out there, and it gives you a pop-up. You don't want to use text messaging for that, because that's unencrypted and unsecure. But these apps are encrypted with AES encryption, and it's much more secure to communicate that way. So it's protected much better than through SMS. But again, I need to stress that you don't want to use your business account when you're signing up for all those third-party services and apps like Spotify and Dropbox, unless that's part of your business role. Those password managers are extremely important, because you can't remember all these passwords, and everybody's telling you to have a different password for everything that you're doing. So you need to have a password manager. You remember one long and strong complex password, and that's the only one you have to remember, because the password managers there will create long, strong passwords for you that are really tough to break with any of the common tools out there. There's a lot of them that are out there. I personally like LastPass and 1Password, and I also use Password1. It's one of those common questions everybody asks: what do you prefer? I try not to endorse a specific vendor, in certain sections, but this one here is one of those important ones where, I'm asked for my opinion, I'm going to give it to you, right? Multi-factor authentication, that was the Authy app that I was just talking about, and each of them have their own, preferred third-party applications. So what you're doing now is you're putting a lot of different applications on your phone, and so you have to have some level of trust with them. But this really breaks out, which ones have what type of authentication code in there. Can you use it on mobile? Can you use it on a watch? Is it something that's going to prompt you on your desktop and what have you? So there's a wide variety. Again, I use every single one of them, because some of these applications only use a certain authentication app, and all of a sudden now you're putting a third one, a fourth one on your phone. But this is another one of those sites that I refer you to is twofactorauth.org. Is if you're looking to sign up for a service and you ask them, do you have two-factor authentication? If you don't get a good answer, you can go here and you can pretty much search by different categories and learn what they have available to you. And so if you go to the social media tab, you can look and see who has two-factor authentication. And if they don't have two-factor authentication, you can see it's in red. You can even post a social media message to them and say, hey, you know, you guys need to do it. And if they get enough of that, then they're kind of peer pressured into it. But my encouragement is if you don't see their name in green, you probably ought to go find another service unless you are willing to accept that risk. So here's what I was talking about with the default passwords in there. This is just a simple example of a website for router passwords where you go to that routerpasswords.com and you have a device in your house, and this is just specifically for routers, but they have them for all different network devices. And you go to the tab there and you can scroll down to any of those devices there, and lo and behold, it tells you what the factory default passwords are. And I can tell you about 95% of the time when I'm doing engagements and security assessments, when I see somebody's APC UPS on a network, I know I'm logging in with it with APC, and I'm going to get in 95% of the time because people just don't lock them down. And then what could I do if I'm a bad guy and I'm in their network? I shut off all of their power backups. And now if I can disrupt power outside, I've disrupted a lot of their critical capabilities for failover. And that's just a simple example, but you know, that's one of those things. If I've got a device at home, you've got a router or you've got a switch or something like that, and you're trying to find that default password, it's an easy way to do that if you've lost your user passwords on there. And on your Windows machine, a lot of people are nuisanced by those pop-ups that are popping up every couple of days or every Tuesday at least, and saying, hey, here's an update you need to add. Hey, we've got a critical update. I'm doing something. I've got to get my billing out. I can't be bothered with that right now, so I'm going to go ahead and click off of that, and we'll get back to that tomorrow. Well, tomorrow never comes in a lot of those cases. I can't count how many times I've showed up at a site for incident response when they've been compromised, and I go to the compromised machine, and as we fire that up, depending on the type of case that it is, we'll fire it up right there on site, and I'll get pop-ups, and they've not been updated in eight or 9 months. And when you ask them about it, it's an inconvenience model. And so you enable those updates in there in your Windows settings and make them automatic for you. Most of the time you hear the scare. The only stuff that you hear on the internet and then social media about the updates or the Windows updates that is breaking things are more in a business class, but you hear very few issues that are really critical where they back up and they roll back. Windows did have an issue several months back where they actually recommended that you roll back one of the versions, but you know, you were able to ride through it pretty well because you're on the call today, right? You're most likely, the majority of you are using a Windows machine during this call. Down in the bottom at the yellow, that's really more for business owners and the IT managers themselves. You know, you need to have policies for your employees who are working from home, and you create some frequently asked questions. When you get enough of those questions on how do I, or how can I, or I'm having a hard time doing something, and it's answered, then create those frequently asked questions. And we're going to talk about VPN validation and VPNs in just a moment, but one of the other things is with that patch management, you create a policy mandating that for your employees so that they're not bringing risk when they connect up to your network by bypassing that. And the last piece that I put in orange there is endpoint vulnerability assessment. So once your employee is connected up or you've connected up, your company ought to be scanning your machine because it's either a business-owned machine or you've allowed them to put certain tools on there to connect up to their business network. If it's your personal machine that you're connecting up to the business network, it's almost like using a phone with a stipend type of thing. I'm using my personal device for business purposes. There's a bit of a trade-off there. So you're really crossing that line if a business thinks they're going to cross in and scan somebody's personal device. They ought to be asking them, if you're going to connect to my business network, you've got to allow me to scan that device. But what you don't want to do is allow somebody to scan your entire home network. And that's why we're going to talk in a moment about virtual networking and VLANs and isolating your business machines within that space in there. Talking about wireless now, Gary did a great job last week, I think, talking about the wireless. So if you didn't see it last week, go back and watch that because he talked about securing the wireless and isolating your personal and your business wireless out there, and using WPA encryption. Those are capabilities that are on there that pop up as you're configuring those wireless devices. Never let your wireless be deployed with open security or WEP security. WEP is an old security option, and it's a capability, and it takes about 6 minutes to break that hash when you collect that up. So it's as if you don't even have security on your network. And we see that in a lot of medical places because it's easy, it's quick. And the other thing that I'll talk a moment about is WPS. Matter of fact, well, there goes my one big, huge moment of humor right there that I was talking about. So one of the things that you don't want to do is if you have two radios on your phone or your laptop, a lot of people will connect up an additional wireless access point or another wireless radio on their laptop so they can connect up to 2 or 3 different access points. And then one will be for their business side and they're connected up. And then one will be connected back to their personal home network. You don't want to do that because it creates a backdoor tunnel into your business network. So somebody's able to crack or bust into their home network. They're able to traverse that machine and use that secure tunnel that's created in there and kind of ride that signal down to the business. And one of the things that we found, and I'm having to deal with this on a couple of instances right now, is that people are doing business on their machine, but they've got another machine over here that's connected up, and they're over here doing whatever they want to do on the internet on that other side over there. And the company can see what they're doing on the internet because they're logged in with the same account on both their personal machine and their business machine. So they double logged in. So it's collecting those logs when they're out there surfing porn or whatever they're supposed to be doing. Whatever they're supposed to be doing is they're being distracted by that. So that's a huge challenge for a lot of companies as well. A lot of companies are asking, can I put a software client or a piece of software on everybody's machine who works for me so that I can see and collect everything that they're doing? I says, well, you can do that on their personal or on their business laptop because that's your laptop. You have every right to do that, but you can't do that on other personal machines at home. You're just really crossing that ethical boundary in doing that. And you're probably going to wake up with a lawsuit one day. WPS, wireless protected setup, is one of those things as well that it makes it really easy to connect. You don't have to remember a password. You set up all the settings in your wireless router or your modem or your printers, and a lot of devices have that now. And it's easy to set up, but it's also easy to forget that you left it configured to allow people who have physical access to that device to walk up. And I've got a phone and I'm in your house and I come in to do repair or something like that. I'm the stove repair guy. I walk into your kitchen and I see your router sitting over there and I see that WPS button and I hit it, and then I hit connect on my phone, and I've not needed a password at all, but it sets itself in a mode where it's allowing anybody to access at the time. And for that period of time, you're vulnerable, and I connect up and then I go about my business. And I'm connected to your network now, and you don't even realize it in most cases. And then I go away, and I can come back that next night or something, and I can or whenever you're not home, and I can pull out in your front of your house, and there's a good chance I can still sniff your signal and connect to your network and do whatever I'd like. So it's a risk. And we always encourage, don't have any devices that are sitting out in the open. You can go into the software and you can disable WPS in there. So any of those devices that you do have in your network, you want to turn on the firewall, your printers, your routers, your routers and modems that are connected or that are provided to you by your ISP, your internet service provider. They also have the capability to have firewalls turned on. Unfortunately, a lot of times we see them just kind of out of the box still because they've come out and swapped it out because you had some issues. They want to jump to the next job. They get it in, connect it up, and they do the same thing like everybody else does with their own personal devices. And they don't really configure them very well. So you want to go in and make sure that they're configured. And you know, it's difficult to sit here and say, hey, here's how you do it, because there's such a wide variety of them. I encourage you to take the time to, you know, pull down the manuals for each of those books. And if you're not comfortable, you know, doing those types of configurations, find somebody who is close to you that you trust that will do that for you. Call Diana. She will come out and fix your systems for you. No, I know. Nobody wants to do. I know. See, people say, "Hey, will you come to my house?" I go, "I don't do residential." So sorry, Diana. I don't mean to put that burden on you. But you know, everybody's got somebody in their family at the family reunion. That's the guy who spends half his time out there at the barbecue, you know, updating everybody's phone and all that. Those are the people you need to gravitate towards. But I'll talk about the virtual network here. So this is a basic network map, and you can see on here I've got 4 different pools in there, one of which is red, and that is the business side of the network. So all the rest of it is all your things that you have at home, and you might have, you know, just basic, you know, networking gear. You might have your team's gear and those types of things, but
hey,
for a lot of
Tony.
homeowners, yes,
Tony,
ma'am.
can you make that bigger?
It's full screen.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Sorry, it's as big as it'll get.
Okay. I'm just going to get closer to the screen so I can see.
There you go. Here you go.
Thank you.
Does she
I'll
know
put it
that
this
you
way
can
for you.
slide over your picture smaller and make that screen bigger?
Oh yeah, for the
yeah,
on there. I see what you mean. But anyway, so the point is, in the very middle, you have the gray boxes there. Those are your ISP. That's your cable modem and your router that you have for your internet service at home in most cases. And that's where you connect out to the raw internet. And you might have a second one in there because of the way you've got a connection. But then you build out these virtual LANs and virtual networks within your own network in there that isolate and encapsulate in containers all of your devices. And so in my case, I've got all my security devices and all my IoT, the Internet of Things devices that, you know, could really go sideways, all in one container. And then all the home storage and production, all my backups and everything were in another space. And then you put all those, you know, those spooky, risky devices, and that's where I talk about the teens computers in there, because who knows what all the teenagers have on theirs, because they don't really, you know, care too much about security these days. They're just kind of, you know, wide open throttle. And then you have your virtual LAN for your business network right there, where you're connecting up to your wireless access point on a different channel, on a different SSID, where you log in with the different credentials, and everything else on your home is completely isolated. That way, if somebody from your business is scanning back to your business machine, that's all they're seeing. And so you might only have just that machine and maybe some storage there with that. And you'll be able to, that's a full screen that you'll be able to you know, take a look at. Probably easier when you get the PDF. So with those virtual private networks, there's 2 kinds now. There's the personal ones that you use for your own commercial and personal use, and then there's the business side. I'll talk about the personal side here first. And there's a wide variety of them. Everybody says, what's your favorite? My personal favorites are NordVPN and CyberGhost. And it comes to a question, Lou, you asked it last week. You mentioned it to Gary about the concern that you have when you connect up and then you're going, fast. You got a gigabit connection and you're going smoking fast, and then you turn on your VPN and it throttles you down to, almost 25% is all you have left. One of the things that Nord has, they have the links connection capability in there, and you won't see a degraded signal very much in your connection whatsoever. And if you're able to see this on mine, I'm connected up right now. In fact, as we're communicating, I'm sitting here, I'm communicating to you from Germany today, right? But right up in here is your Nord Links connection. And there's a bunch of different ways you can connect, but that Nord Links is smoking fast, and I'm only losing about 25% of my gigabit connection. So
I've been using, just to follow up on that, I've been using Norton, the VPN, and I've been checking my speed test with different speed test devices. That regular speed test, whatever it's called, the normal one that you use, speedtest.net. It's not as good as the other ones that he brought up last week. I've been using the ones that he said, and they're much more realistic, I think. And I'm not losing as much as I thought through the VPN. I'm losing about 25%, like you said.
Yeah, good.
That's really remarkable, though, when you consider that each packet's going to have to be encrypted and decrypted, that you only lost 20%. That's amazing.
Well, I have fiber optic, and I have a gigabyte. I have a gigabyte of fiber optic speed with AT&T.
Yeah, and so and it's only been out for probably, I guess, 3 months, 4 months now.
Right.
Is that it's been pushed out, and it's changing the way, and a lot of them are. CyberGhost is jumping on it as well. They're not necessarily on board completely yet, but the significant piece on the difference between your business internet VPNs and your personal is that you are using somebody else's server. And as I showed you there, I'm sitting there connecting through Germany right now. So I'm on somebody else's server. I have to have that level of trust when I'm using their connection. And I can jump over to pick the country and I find out which ones are my, my favorites. But remember, they're not saving those logs and all that, but also everything that you're passing through is going to their server. So you have to recognize that and remember that. And then when you connect out to the internet, it's kind of blind traffic.
So then is that safe? That doesn't feel safe. That doesn't sound safe to me.
You're accepting that risk. So it all depends on what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what you're trying to obfuscate while you're doing it. I do it because I'm crawling in. I'm doing it when I'm doing an investigation. I spend half of my time in the dark net and the deep web and all those creepy places that you read about that nobody wants to go to. But I'm looking for those guys who are the ones who are hacking networks, and I'm trying to hide in the noise. So I'm protecting myself as well, because I don't want my IP and my home address to be associated with my activities while I'm searching for them. And then they say, well, I've got his home address, let's go after him. And they start blowing up my connection. So it's there's a lot of legitimate use and there's a lot of reasons why, but at the same time, there's a lot of crime that takes place in those spaces out there.
So basically what it does is it puts out another IP address.
Yeah, it does. It obfuscates your presence, and you have an entry point and then your exit node that you come out of. I'm broadcasting as if I'm in Germany. There's some things that I can't read, like we do it in the United States. We blacklist, pick a country, right? And we won't let this specific country hit my network. But if they use a VPN and they're using a US node as they're exiting, Now I'm going to allow them in my network because it looks like they're coming to me from Georgia. So, all right. So the business VPN side of it, the difference and uniqueness of that is that you've got the employee has a client on their machine. It's either a software or hardware client, and then the company has one. And so those are the only 2 points. It's point-to-point communications between those 2 devices, where when I connect up with my laptop and I turn on, the Cisco AnyConnect connection or whatever that is, I connect up to my VPN client in my office, and then it's that PFM we're talking about earlier, that pure friggin' magic, where your business network magically appears on your machine, and now you can see the internals of your network, and it's as if you're sitting at your desk in the office. So, kind of moving on to the malware and antivirus piece of it. Lots of discussion on what's the best in class, who's eating up too many resources. Everybody has their better days and worse days, and you can put 10 people in a room and get 20 different opinions on which one is best. I'm not so impressed with any of them these days because I watch the bad guys bypass a lot of the antivirus solutions across all platforms these days. But the one thing that I am somewhat impressed with is Malwarebytes. No matter what solution you decide to deploy, make sure you're getting the paid version of that antivirus. Remember, if you're getting anything free, you're the product of that company's marketing plan. And so they're selling your services, they're selling your data to somebody to make money somehow. And so free really isn't free. And I encourage you to put Malwarebytes and install Malwarebytes business license on each one of those devices that you have as well. And that will really save you a lot of heartache and issue down the road. Your email is what you really associate it with a lot of threats, and a lot of people think about, well, they got in, they hacked my email, and it's because I clicked on something. In most cases, it has been like that for a long time, but it's starting to migrate from that, and they're really attacking you and a lot of your social media activity. Most of the young employees are using their phones more than they are a laptop at all when they're on their personal time. And so they're really attacking through social media. The hot links that they're dropping in their text messaging. But email is one that if they get access to your email, that's kind of the crown jewels for somebody, because there's so much critical data that you're traversing. You're accessing your bank, and you're receiving lots of communications from all those services that you're signed up to. So that becomes a clearinghouse for all of that important data about you when they're doing their research. For us, if we're able to get into somebody's mail when we're doing our open source intelligence collection prior to an engagement, if we get into somebody's mail, it's game over, because we can learn so much about them, and we can, create that personality, and we can create those accounts and pretty much, serve as them. And it's very easy to send an email to somebody else and make it look like it came from you without much effort put into that. So be careful with your email, and make sure that you're going through all those security measures and locking that down, and follow those guidelines that they all provide with it. On your Windows 10 machine, most of y'all raise your hand if you use Windows 10. Dave, what are you using? You using a Mac? Oh, there you go. I got the thumb up from Dave. That was magic. But one of the settings in Windows 10, it enables you to set up ransomware protection within the machine itself, and some of the, all of the new software loads in there. So you can do that just by going down to that toolbar down there in your start menu, and you type in Windows Security, and that's the window that'll pop up. And then you click on that one, and it'll bring you down to virus and threat protection. You go to ransomware protection, and you can set up a backup of that machine, either with your OneDrive or your Google Drive or whatever that resource is, but it'll set up those backups for you in that machine, and it's very intuitive, even for the common user who says, man, I can't do that, it's complex. It's really straightforward. And you turn that on and you set it and forget it for a lot of that piece of it there. That way, if you do have that issue where things go sideways for you on your machine, you've got that safety net in place. It's not 100% proof, none of it ever is, but it's a much better solution than we've operated with in the past. So all of that said, one of the big failure points is that we talk about ourselves all the time, and we love social media, and we love to promote our business and what we're doing, and oh, we got that great job. One of the things that we use quite a bit is we target those new employees. And when they go out and they get that new job at pick the company, and they post out their badge, and they post out their, look at me, I got, here's my welcome package at Microsoft. Now I've got a picture of what the new badges look like at Microsoft. So if I want to print one and make it look like them and go hang out on campus and, sneak my way into their facility by putting on a hard hat and a yellow vest, everybody's going to let me in, that type of thing. You make yourself a softer target when you're doing that. And so people are getting bored when they're sitting at home working now, and then they start posting things on social media. And there's lots of people who are doing job changes and changing careers as a result of this COVID. So I just caution and be careful about posting out all of those activities. Nobody cares that you had a hot chocolate. Just like nobody cares when I make my, whatever crap I'm cooking today, and you go to my Instagram page, that's all about my stupid food that I post out there. But you know what? I'm willing to take that risk. Nobody's hacking my sushi. So you don't want to end up in the dark net for some of these things by doing some of these things, because when they do compromise you, the bad guys are taking your data and they're dropping ransomware on you, then they're holding your data hostage. And that's where it ends up, is down there in the dark net somewhere. And it's really easy for the bad guys these days. They have what they call ransomware as a service. Just like you might think Salesforce or any of these heads-up dashboards that are out there that can go for $400 and buy this nice command and control center, that they can build ransomware and start targeting organizations. All they have to do is plug in a company's name and it starts launching attacks at their organization. And they just need one person to click it, or they find one vulnerable machine, and then it's game over. As we say in the South, you're pregnant. Once you're pregnant, it's really difficult to get unpregnant. I know, sorry, Dave, I know you've heard me say that more than once, but the reality is it's so easy for these guys to create that software and those attack mechanisms and then deploy it. And they're able to keep up with who's been victimized and who's my targets. And then, have they paid yet? Well, they haven't paid. Well, I'm getting ready to dump their data out in the dark net and the markets out there. Companies like Truniger Group are one that they came out of retirement last year just because they saw the opportunity. A bunch of these guys left after Gang Crab last June, and they retired with $2.5 billion in their pocket. And they came back out of retirement because they saw the opportunity, because they know everything's going to go sideways, and they've been very successful with it. And so they even, if you see on the right there, they said, if I'm not able to get in your network and really take it over, but I get a little bit of your data, I'm dumping it. And if you don't pay the ransom and you're able to back up your data and recover it, I'm still dumping your data. And people are saying, well, no, they didn't get my data, and they don't have my critical information. And they're proving it every day by dropping it in these sites on the darknet. And these are some of the examples of the dark markets and some of the companies that are out there that are having their information dumped. And what they do is they dump that proof of life, just like they might in a hostage situation. You have a hostage hold up today's newspaper to show that they've got them today, and it's not an old picture. Well, they're doing that with their critical data. And Optumara is one of the companies that got compromised last week or last month. And then the city of Knoxville, you probably read about them in the news. Well, the mayor came out on Monday in the city of Knoxville. They got compromised on the 11th of June. They came out and said, look, the data that they have is not the real data. I don't know what they're talking about, but they don't have anything critical of ours. Well, I went out and I downloaded it. So they do have their data. I'm sitting there looking at, an entire set of data sets that, pretty much outline their entire internal infrastructure. They wouldn't have that data unless they were inside of their wire in there. And oh, by the way, right up the top, they're using Windows XP inside of their city network. So that's a bad day in the office for somebody anyway. But time and time again, you saw the Wortman law firm is another one of those examples where they've got a lot of high visible clients out there, and there's a zoom in of it that they're putting that data out there. Last is that example there of somebody who's put somebody's data up there for auction. In fact, they're starting the bids at $1 million for everything to a single buyer. And if you give me $10 million, I'll just go ahead and sell it to you outright. We won't even do the auction. So somebody sign up. So we just point out a lot of those things that are really obvious, but the bad news is if they really want to get into your network, there's not a lot you're going to be able to do to stop it. So that's why it's so important to back up that data and to make sure that you're using two-factor authentication so that when somebody does try to log in, you are being alerted. The last two things I want to point out, there's been a huge uptick in a lot of these unemployment fraud cases throughout the state of Nevada, but it's going all over the continental United States now. Oklahoma's heavily involved in it, state of Washington and New Jersey is being pummeled. But Nevada's got, as of today, this afternoon, about 30 minutes before the talk, they're at 11 counties right now that are reporting that people are filing fraudulent unemployment filings. And what they're doing is the DEETR is going back and verifying with HR. So a lot of it is being thwarted early on, but they're filing these. Some systems aren't quite as savvy in catching it. So I encourage you to go to DEETR and you go to the quick links up there, and the same place that you would file for unemployment, you can also go in there and you can look yourself up and see if your name is associated with the filing. But if you do see that it is, you can also file fraud report, and they've got the fraud report form in there, and you file that on yourself. So with that, I promise you there will be a whole bunch of links there. You'll have those links, and you'll have that in the data set that I'm providing to Dave. And with that, I hope this has inspired you to think about security in a little bit of a different way, and thinking about the relationship between business and your home networks, and taking care of your people, whether you're an employee or a business owner. And with that, I'm right at 40 minutes. Holy crap, that's magic. So thank you guys for your time, and I open up to any of the questions that you might have.
So it wasn't a good idea for me to put a picture of my new credit card on the Facebook?
No, it was a great idea, and I do appreciate that, Dave. Thank you. Should I undo everybody's mics? I guess maybe, huh?
It's a very nice deck. If you go back one slide, the next to the last slide, though, I think you got one typo.
I'm sure I probably do. I did this at I finished this at about 1:30 this morning because I made a comment to Dave on Monday or Tuesday, and he said, "Hey, looking forward to Wednesday." And I said, "Oh, I guess I ought to start building slides." I really kind of wasn't kidding, only because I normally would have done it this weekend, but I was pummeled and hammered with some, not even kidding, I've been doing data breaches ever since Friday, putting in a lot of hours, so yeah.
Look at the next to the last slide. Then the next to last, not this one, but the one right before it.
That one?
I still see the same slide. This one. When you don't take care of people, they will take care of you.
Yeah, so when you take care, so that's an old counterintelligence term. That's not a typo. I've been using that slide for 20 years.
Oh, yeah?
So
when you don't take care of, when you take care of
So-
people, they will take care of you?
So this is a counterintelligence term
Okay.
for the insider threat. If you take care of your people, they'll take care of you. If you don't take care of your people, they will take care of you. And it's mostly when they're walking out the door and they take your data with them.
Oh, I see what you mean.
They're
Okay.
taking your dirt along with them, and they're going to give that to the next company that they're getting ready to go to. That type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an old CI term.
Hey, Tony, on the
Yes, sir.
321 backup,
Yeah.
if you're backing up to say OneDrive, wouldn't the ransomware also have access to that through your computer automatically, or no?
Yeah, but you can detach that. You can detach your OneDrive, and you can disassociate it and turn it off so it's not always on type of thing. So there's flexibility in that. But yeah, I mean that's again one of those options that you could do the same thing with Dropbox, and you just you right click it on your toolbar and shut it off. Once it's synced up, does its daily sync, and then you disassociate it, it won't come back. Now the caution is if they're in your machine and they own your machine and they're driving your machine, they're able to click it right back on as well. But if you sign out of that account, you're not gonna fall into that issue. Unless they have your credentials and your two-factor authentication, they try to log into it, then it's gonna pop back up for you. So you'll know that somebody's trying to log into your OneDrive. Come on, who else?
There's, Tony, there's a question from Karen. Will the U.S. banking system start encrypting like the European folks?
What? I'm sorry again.
The question is, will the U.S. banking system start encrypting like the European folks?
I don't know that I could speak to that in an educated way. I don't know. To be quite honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't be the best one to answer that. I know that a lot of the cards that you've got now and a lot of your banking cards, a lot of the crypto, when they went to the chip after the big Target fiasco and the point of sale system, and they said, well, we got this whole new chip system that we're going to. Unfortunately, while they were in the deployment process, there was a $40 hack that a Russian kid named RaaS distributed out in the community, and it takes $40 to build the tools for it, and the point of sale systems that they distributed around the U.S. markets were compromised before they ever went out. So you're no more secure now with the chip system than you were prior to the chip system in those days. So it's really still the back end is where there was a flaw in there. The front end, that risk, the chip itself is, the controller device is much more secure than it was, but it's still the back end communication.
Are the new contactless cards better, different, worse?
They're much better when somebody doesn't bump you and they're able to sniff those cards, but all they're doing is they're sniffing your card, and it's a near field card, but they still can't break that cipher that I'm aware of. But there's lots of folks who are already talking about it. There's a huge Discord channel right now talking about a lot of that. I just got a notification from my Citibank card that they've got one on the way, and it's all going to be magic now. And I go, oh yeah, I'm healed.
So the thing with the Europeans has more to do with the laws driving the technology than here in the United States.
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, I don't keep up so much with the European space other than the GDPR, and that's usually just because a U.S. business is doing business over in Europe and they have to be GDPR compliant.
That was
So,
so
Tony,
informative. Thank you, Tony.
I'm just
Thanks,
overwhelmed.
Lou.
Your plethora of information, yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize for that, Peter. I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, when they ask, you know, a lot of people say, well, what should I do to secure my network at home? And I go, look, you're the one who has asked me how to turn your phone on because you don't know where the on button is on your phone. I'm not going to be able to educate, you know, that person on configuring a firewall in that instance like that. But the safety net in that and the takeaway, Peter, is that, you know, you have that slide deck and there's some information you can reference, but there's so much referenceable material nowadays for your make and model of a specific device. What should I do to secure that specific device? And when you realize that it's over your head, that's half the battle right there. You realize it and you recognize it and you make sure that you go get somebody to assist you, as opposed to just throwing your hands up in the air and go, you know what? I got internet. I'm probably okay.
No, I'm taking away some of the things you said, and I've got my notes here to go investigate some of these things. But it's just like everything else with the internet and the computers, it's that learning curve. You know, you got to, okay, now how does this connect to that? How does this relate to that? I didn't turn on my refrigerator to the internet, but it was just another thing that I said, I don't want to worry about this.
Look, Peter, it's so important for you to know how many eggs you have left in your refrigerator when you're out and about so that you know you need to pick up eggs while you're out. That's important.
Hey, Tony, on your schematic for building out a virtual network, it looked like you had an extra device after the router. Do you need to have anything beyond the router to set up a virtual network? No,
you don't. And it all depends. It kind of gives you the most options. If you just put one up there, you go to some places and you'll just have your cable modem from AT&T. It's got wireless built into it. Some of them don't. So they've got an additional, you know, you've got your modem and then you've got a router that you've put in there, a secondary router. I've got Pi holes all over the place on each of my VLANs, Raspberry Pis that serve as little honey pots all around. But a lot of people will put a switch right behind it, and then that way they distribute, you know, wired network throughout their house. So it just gives you a little bit of that flexibility in there. And again, it was one of those, no matter if I were to put one, there'd be somebody to say, well, you know, I'm using Charter and I've got to have two because I've got a cable modem and I have to have the secondary router because of mine where I live out in the sticks. And I've got DSL. I can't have anything. You know, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. Enjoy it.
Thanks. Bravo. Bravo.
All right.